And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is David Chen. You've reached us over here at youtube.com/Dave Chensky. That's Dave Chen SKY. And thanks for doing so. We know you have choices when it comes to when you want to watch things and how you want to do things in your life. And we appreciate you sticking with us here on this final episode of our weekly recap show of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Or is it The Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I think the title has actually changed, Dan Gvozden.
Oh, well, now we're getting into deep
Oh,
spoilers
we're
for
already
the
in
end
spoiler
credits.
already in spoiler territory. But anyway, yes, I'm joined today, as always, by Dan Gvozden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. Dan, thank you so much for being with me today. How's it going, man?
I'm doing all right. I woke up first thing this morning and put on the show, and I finished it less than 5 minutes ago, and here we are
Wow,
talking about it.
you don't want to give it time to like bake a little bit before we really dove into it.
Oh, well, you're coming for the hottest of hot takes, and
This
these
is
are these are straight out of the oven.
this take is piping hot, piping
Yeah.
hot. Before we get into today's episode, a few things. First of all, people might be wondering, what are we doing here? We're recapping every episode of The Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're going to spoil every episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. So if you don't want to be spoiled, tune out. Second thing I want to point out, this is a YouTube-only show. It's on youtube.com/Dave Chensky. There is no podcast version of it, for those who are curious. Third thing I want to say is, there's so many YouTube shows, podcasts, etc. out there of people that love this show. They're just like, this is the best show. This is the best invention since sliced bread. If that's you, go seek those shows out. You will have a much better time than listening to me complain about the Falcon and Winter Soldier. On the other hand, if you want two hardened, jaded geeks' opinion on Falcon and Winter Soldier, you've come to the right place.
I want that on a t-shirt. Hardened, jaded geek.
I actually encountered someone in the wild today, out in the real world, that actually watches this YouTube recap show, and it was very gratifying. Dan Gvozden. I thought no one watched this. I thought people watched it and then threw it in the trash. But here we are, and like, there's at least two people I know that are
Uh,
watching this YouTube recap.
two things really quickly, David. One, I appreciate your staying
Oh,
on
whoops.
brand, which even on our final episode, you're telling people to not watch.
Yes.
And
Sorry about that.
two, could you characterize? Was that person able to characterize exactly what the appeal that they found in the show this show was?
Well, I think it's our incredibly magnetic personalities, is how I would
Oh,
describe it. So, anyway, let's dive into the final episode, which is entitled, what is it? One World, One People. Season 1, Episode 6 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Are there any follow-ups from last week, Dan Gvozden? The one follow-up I want to point out is somebody either last week or a couple weeks ago made a very astute comment on the YouTube channel. They said, I love how the show is working so hard to convince you that these people need lots of help. Like, and what he's referring to is like that Sam needs like the support of his community or whatever, when in reality these people would be like mega famous, successful, and I mean, just literally, we talked about this in our first recap. Like, Sam could just, he could be an Instagram influencer. Brands would be running to him to be like, do you want to do a co-sponsorship or something? You know, like, there, he could very easily get all the money and the resources that he needed, but the show needs you to feel like he can't in order to have the amazing dramatic tension that we got with the boat subplot.
did
Uh,
Iron Man leave nobody any money? Like the more I think about like his death, you've got like Peter Parker, who's supposed to be this like hard up kid that has no money and is this small time hero. But did Iron Man not leave his little like mentee like a $2 million, like just the smallest penny from his fortune to help out this kid that he cared so much about in his dying breath? It just seems like, wait, are there ramifications for like Iron Man's death and his loved ones he left behind? It's something I'm latching on to this week.
I do sympathize, because whenever you have a plot mechanic, like someone who's ultra rich, or in the case of Elysium, like the just random example, like we were talking about Neil Blomkamp's Elysium on the Slash Filmcast many years ago, and it's like I think there's a device in that movie that heals you, like no matter what disease you have, if you go into this device, and it's like when you have something that's like kind of like a trump card, like this will solve all your problems to some degree. It's very hard to navigate around, right? So I get it. If Tony Stark is ultra rich and he gives everyone like lots of money, like doesn't that solve like way more of their problems?
For sure.
So anyway, let's dive into this episode now. I want to start by talking about this article I tweeted by Allegra Frank over at Slate.com. Headline of the article is "The Falcon and the Winter Soldier wasn't as groundbreaking as it thought it was," and she begins this piece by saying, talking about, spoilers for this episode, but talking about Sam becoming Captain America. And she writes, quote, "I wish I could call this a satisfying conclusion. In a sense, it is. We have a black Captain America. For a black man to now embody one of Marvel's marquee heroes is a significant direction for the slowly diversifying cinematic universe to take. But Sam assumes the role only after nearly 6 plodding, aimless hours of Marvel movie light action and tepidly explored, sometimes conflicting themes. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or Captain America and the Winter Soldier, as it's renamed at the end, was not the thoughtful treatise on race it positioned itself to be, nor was it a compelling interstitial between big-screen Marvel movies. The entire show landed with a thud, rudderless and overly long, and ultimately, disappointingly, forgettable." So, want to hear your reaction to that. Let's start with that. What's your reaction to that? When I read that, do you feel like, yes, that's absolutely correct? Or do you feel like, oh, wow, Allegra Frank is being too hard on the show?
I don't know. I don't really like to make like I get that like that's you read like the headline, and I'm sure the article goes into greater detail of why she feels that way. I'm reluctant to like latch myself onto any kind of like bold statement of like absolute failure, because I do think that there are virtues to be found within this show. Even just kind of foregoing like production elements, like flashy spectacle. I do think there is at least some coherent worldview behind the new Captain America. And why he has taken up this role, that also doesn't completely reinvent the character, so that if you miss the show, you can still tune into the next movie, which I don't know if that's like a plus or minus. And I'm also reluctant, and I'll leave it to better people than me to write about this, but I don't feel like all of these shows have to be everything to everyone. And they can make a comment where they feel like they're capable of doing so. And I do think that there was some, like positive conversation introduced here, into the topic of the role of a black Captain America. Was it as deep as I would have wanted it to be? Far from it. But I think within the context of this kind of like pop culture machine, like it was nice to see them take some steps forward, or I guess maybe like sideways alongside Black Panther. But yeah, I mean, I think overall I agree with the article, but first of all, I'm still processing it. But I do think that like people will find value in it, and I don't want to take that away from anybody that did find some representation here in some way. I don't know if I'm making any sense, David.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to the fact that the show did do some things that were interesting and kind of daring. It actually attempted to address the idea of race and being a black Captain America. It actually introduced the idea that maybe the U.S. military is not always good all the time.
Right.
And sure, you get some of that with other movies like Iron Man and stuff like that, but like it really took it head on in a way that I feel like very few, if any, other Marvel films did. Right. One of the things I can think of is like Thor Ragnarok. Right. The idea that in Thor Ragnarok, spoilers for Thor Ragnarok, but you find out that everything that the world that Thor lives in is built on is like atrocity and terrible violence, right? And you get a little bit of that in this show as well. So let's talk about just like our overall thoughts on this finale and the season as a whole.
Yeah, sure.
This
Yeah.
finale was theoretically going to be. We were like, hey, is this going to tie up all of these things in any kind of satisfying way, right? Uh, and I was pretty doubtful, and I think overall my doubts were proven correct. But I'm curious, like, here's what I'll say about the finale. Some of the action was good and interesting. There were a handful of great moments. Looking back on the entire show, it feels really, really muddled. They tried to do way too much, and there were so many subplots that just landed with like a wet fart, like just felt like a colossal waste of time. It was just too unfocused for it to be a satisfying story, in my opinion. Okay, your thoughts on finale and reflecting back on the whole show.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfocused is the right word. I think we'll never really know the true extent of the reshoots and reshuffling of this
Right.
show. But what you get is something that I think is paying attention in all of the wrong places. Look, some of the action in this finale was spectacular, but I didn't need to see Sam save a helicopter full of people. We already kind of saw that. If only to
Literally in the
learn
first
now that,
episode.
yeah, but I guess maybe this time the character growth is he didn't murder everybody on board.
Yes.
Um, but
Good for
I
him.
don't know that that's where my attention should have been placed. And I think for a show that, I mean, I think it's fair to say that this has been a fairly character oriented show, even if you disagree with the way that the characters have been portrayed or how their arcs have been handled. It's much more character based than action spectacular. I mean, we get like maybe a scene or two per episode of action, and we praised
I mean,
the
I would say that's actually pretty action based. Like,
okay.
if a TV show has like one or two major action scenes per episode, that's like fairly action heavy in my opinion.
I guess that's fair. I mean, I guess I look at it and I see like Sam walking into a room with Carly and trying to convince her, otherwise. Like I think the thrust of the main character is to de-escalate in some way, and spending so much time on like this big action spectacle to end it, I think it makes sense structurally that you do that. You want to end with a big bang,
Yeah.
but there were so many moving pieces that just I didn't care about. Like I don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I know there were like GRC members on board that helicopter, but I couldn't tell you why I'm supposed to care about that, or who Sam is chasing or Bucky is chasing after on a motorcycle. There were too many moving pieces, and if it could have been a little more character oriented, like I could have bought into that a bit more. And I just feel like it's a misplaced focus. And then you get just like you said, wet farts of character wrap ups. And I think for me, it's I don't know how to feel about half of the characters in this show.
Yes. 100%.
Like
I mean, I think that uh, something you brought up in the first episode of this recap show that we've done is Carly Morgenthau is like very young, right? And it's like, how would a young person like this have risen to the highest ranks of this Flag Smashers organization? Hopefully, we're gonna find out during the rest of the show. I don't think we ever find out. Like, she is a boring villain, and this is not even about the actress. The actress is fine. It's just like the character. There's nothing there that makes her interesting, charismatic, or makes you understand why all these people will be willing to follow her. We spend about as much time watching people doubt her abilities and her direction as we do watching them be inspired by her, if not more so. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like most of my memories of her interacting with her quote unquote staff is like them being like, "Are you sure we should do this?" You know, and it's like, why did people follow her in the first place? It just is. Anyway. So,
but even if you're going to follow that thread, that ultimately came to nothing. You know, no one ever turns against her in the end or makes a stand and says like you're misrepresenting our cause. No, in fact, Captain America kind of both sides it and supports her in the end. And it's like, okay, so how are we supposed to feel about any of this? And then you can like add on to that, which is like John Walker. Remember when he killed a guy with his shield on public television? Well, guess what? He's back and
he's
helping
back.
out Bucky.
Everyone's great now. He and Bucky are all good now, basically.
Yeah, and it's just and like those things just keep adding up, you know. And then you've
Yes.
got like Baron Zemo, like who's in like custody, who's orchestrating things from within prison, and then like you're like, oh yeah, that guy was a part of this show, and I actually wonder like as much as like I think that performance from Daniel Bruhl was fun and meme worthy. To me, looking back on the show, I think Baron Zemo is kind of where they went wrong because he complicated the morality of characters that didn't need their morality complicated, and he ended up being completely inconsequential to the plot by the ending. You know, we get like just a like de facto shot of him in prison here, doing something that I can't really discern. And it's like we really went on this long tangent into Madripoor and and exploring this character, and it felt like, okay, like let's do something fun with this villain, but they had no real plan for it, and it allowed us to veer completely away from the central themes of this thing, and yeah, like I said, complicate Sam and Bucky's morals and quest forward. So I mean, like you said, unfocused. That's my real takeaway.
Indeed. Let's talk about some of the stuff that actually happens in this episode. There's a massive action scene at the beginning where I guess Carly is trying to murder the GRC people, right? Or capture them or imprison them. Is that what's happening? Like, what is your interpretation of what's going on
My
here?
interpretation is that they were going to capture them and like hold them hostage
Yeah, sure.
to get what they wanted, but then obviously she has her own plan, which is to just, I think, just cold-blooded kill them. Like there's a point where she just hijacks a car and tries to drive them off a cliff, essentially.
Right, right. So a
Yeah.
massive fight scene ensues, and some of the fight scene moments are pretty cool, but there's just a lot of weird stuff happening. Like, why is John Walker? Like, John Walker returns and he fights the GRC, but then he and Bucky like are good. They team up again. It's like not even awkward at all. So that's just really weird. Sharon Carter is the power broker. Huge. I bet there was a gasp in the Gvozden household when that was revealed. Is that true?
It's one of those things where you like wish that the writers were smarter. And so you're like, it couldn't possibly be that because that's way too telegraphed. So, you begin denying all the people who are theorizing about it because you're like, that's not even a theory. It just seems that way on face value. And so then when it's revealed, you're like, well, I guess they weren't as smart as I thought they were.
Also,
So
the
there
vicious
was a
ocean in the chat,
gasp.
by the way, to correct, the vicious ocean in the chat says she's trying to stop the count/vote. So
Okay.
thank you for clearing that up. And it seems like she's willing to murder people in the process of that. I mean, anyway.
Doesn't she know she could just lie about it for a couple months and then have the world rise up against the GRC
Yeah.
in a insurrection? Like, anyway, I'm going.
So Sharon Carter, I think the issue with the Sharon Carter character, people in the chat are really lighting up Sharon Carter, which is like well deserved, fine. I think it's like a terribly handled character. The question is, what is Sharon Carter's journey, right? Like, what is her emotional journey? I guess like she was exiled from the U.S. and then became super evil, right? That's kind of what we are led to believe. And like everything, she was basically like a double agent this entire time, right? Is kind of what we understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still unpacking like her role in all of this, and with
Yeah.
like Batroc. I mean, I guess it was to kind of like infiltrate this thing, and so she could have the upper hand at some point, which I think was supposed to be like this like reveal, like, oh, Batroc is working for her, so now she has two guns pointed at Carly. But even that, like, I mean, it's not even obvious. It was in the text that like Batroc got a phone call from someone, and I think we were meant to understand that it was Sharon Carter. So,
Yeah.
um,
S-
that was, a like you said, a wet fart. I'm just going to keep repeating wet fart and make people really
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
that is uncomfortable. Santiago 3J1 in the chat brings up a really great point. He says, like, Sharon Carter feels like her arc should go along perfectly with Carly as a person who is part of the system, who is forgotten or betrayed by the system, and so she turns her back on the system. The execution is really bad, though. I agree that is a way they could have gone with the Sharon Carter character. The idea that, like, it's a common trope in TV and film that people who the United States uses for its own ends end up chewed up and spit out by the system, and that's like a compelling. It's tragic when it happens, but it's also a compelling source of drama, and this show could have done a lot with that.
And
But
it's every character in the show. I mean, a lot from Elijah Bradley to John Walker,
yeah,
characters that were used by the government, mishandled, given a position, and then shut down for their no fault of their own.
I have a few thoughts. Right, number one is that the Sharon Carter just execution of what she's going through is because we don't really see any of the journey. We just see the beginning of her journey when she's like cool person, and then the end when she's theoretically like a double crossing art dealer, right? And
Yeah,
you don't
was the art dealer like funding these Captain America's super soldier serum ventures?
maybe, but like you don't. It's just kind of like you're seeing her at the beginning, but you don't really even see her really reflect. You don't get any sense of her inner life in this show is the problem, right? So you don't see the journey, you don't see her inner life, so like that whole character doesn't really work, unfortunately. Um, and the other thing you brought, yeah, everyone in the show, like I would say the Isaiah Bradley stuff is actually pretty good in the show. Like it's one of the higher points of the show, right? One of the more compellingly rendered versions of it. But I think you really understand the problem with the show when you get to the reveal that she's the power broker, and as viewers, we just feel absolutely nothing, right? Like, I'm not like surprised. I'm not shocked. I don't even feel satisfied. I'm not even like, yes, that's the thing that like. Ideally, when you have a show and you have this shadowy figure that's controlling everything, and you reveal who it is, you want to feel an emotional reaction to that. I think it's a reasonable thing to expect, right?
This is a Scooby-Doo villain reveal. Like, it's the only person it could be because it's the only
Because there's
person
no other
we met.
characters we've
Yeah,
introduced.
exactly.
It could have been like Contessa de Fontaine or whatever the hell, but like, you know, you
Well,
barely even
don't
know
get
her.
me started on that character yet. We'll
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah. Okay. So, massive fight scene ensues. Carly is killed, basically, right? In the ensuing what have you, and Sharon Carter is shot, but like her true identity is not revealed to the world. Bucky saves people from helicopter stuff. Bucky takes down some flag smashers, saves some hostages. John Walker shows up for some of the revenge. Oh man. Literally,
I
when
will
John Walker
say,
showed up, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy is a character in the show. That was my reaction when he showed up. How do you feel about John Walker's role in this opening action scene?
well, I actually thought it was really interesting to get started. I mean, having him come out with his new shield, and there was this interesting shot where he's like getting like punched at, and it like moves to a close up of like one of his medals of honor on
Yes,
the shield.
that was interesting.
Yeah, there was like I was like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, who is this new guy? How has he reinvented himself? And then the shield is like taken away from him and he's exposed. And I was like, okay. And then like he and Bucky just like became buddy buddy. And I was like, all right, now I have no idea
Yeah.
what is going on here.
It was interesting to see a non-vibranium version of the shield, though.
Yeah.
Because the shield was like flimsy and it would give when you hit it and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting.
I mean,
But,
I'm skipping over like, John Walker making like a complicated right choice to save the hostages and abandon his shield. If I felt something about that, like why he arrived at that. I mean, this is the inherent trouble with this show, with like nearly all of its characters, is it wants to like use them as heroes and villains interchangeably without like guiding us between like the morality code of these people, right? They're just conflicted, but we've not journeyed through that conflict in any way. So when John Walker saves that I guess armored vehicle, I have no understanding of what his conflict was in that moment. I mean, ostensibly, I think this guy's a good guy that's gone wrong.
Was John Walker pre-wired? I guess he had to. I think the show's trying to make you think he had to choose between killing more flag smashers or saving the hostages, right? And it's like, oh, he used to be so evil, he's just murdering flag smashers left and right, but now he's not. He's decided to affirmatively not do that anymore. And like we're supposed to be like, what a nice character moment for that.
Right, but like I don't know what facilitated that, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
So the character stuff I think is a mess. I do want to like shout out to the production though, because I do think like editing wise, like visuals, the spectacle of it is really ambitious, and you get some great images. Like I love the way that first of all, the new costume for Sam Captain America is straight out of the comics and looks great. And the way his wings move effortlessly really sells you on like the vibranium technology. And there's the great shot of him catching this armored vehicle with him in the headlights. Like some really like iconic looking, hero images. There's an image like after Carly dies and he floats down slowly with her in his arms. Like the Pieta kind of thing. This stuff is really, powerful visual imagery. So that's really great, even if it's not supported by, interesting character motivations and clear arcs for these characters.
I would agree that overall the production values were like pretty strong throughout the series, and like the below the line people working the show did a great job. So. I apologize to all of you who might be watching this, who worked on the show and are hearing us discuss why it's not as great, but it has nothing to do with the production values. It's all about the storytelling.
Right.
The John Walker stuff reminds me a lot of the Martha moment in Batman v Superman. Like Batman has spent like 2 hours of Batman v Superman like hating Superman, and then all of a sudden like the word Martha is said, and then he's like, oh yeah, like we're friends now. He literally calls Superman like his friend afterwards, and it's like, yeah, John Walker, they've like literally almost fought to the death last episode, a couple episodes ago, but now like now that he decided not to let the hostages die, they're buddy.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna pull a Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Seinfeld moment here. I don't think he's banter worthy.
In what sense? What does banter worthy mean?
Oh, like right after they're done like saving it, you've got Winter Soldier like cracking jokes with John Walker, and I was like, he's not earned that. Like,
yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
So
So one thing, by the way, one thing we didn't discuss that I feel like we need to discuss is, in my opinion, most of this show, someone in the chat pointed this out, like this feels like the first draft of a script. People in this show do not speak like humans. Okay, A lot of the time, not all the time. Some of the dialogue is naturalistic, but like most of the time, a lot of the time, a lot of the most clanging lines of dialogue, people do not speak like humans. And let me get into this via a moment that is just weird to me. Sam shows up in the building. This is real at the beginning of the episode, and he's like, someone asks him like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Captain America." And you're like, "Oh wow, what a big moment!" And it's like, I don't think that's how any of this works. You know what I mean? Like, isn't it isn't the idea that like the U.S. government designates who Captain America is, and then later on there's this line where it's like, "Hey, it's Black Falcon" or something. Someone says like, "It's Black Falcon," and or I think, and he's like, or it's the Falcon. I don't remember exactly what the character says, but then someone says, "No, man, that's Captain America," and it's like, how would that guy know that that's? It just doesn't. That's not how that works, in my opinion. I'm like Harrison Ford in the Force Awakens. He's like, that's not how any of this works. What do you? Am I? Is this a extremely minor nitpick, Dan
No,
Gvozden?
I mean, I think it's like part and parcel for like a lot of superhero movies. Like I there's the like overly knowledgeable people that are bystanders of things that just like happen to know everything. Or I think often about like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. As much as I love them, like they have a lot of weird cutaways to bystanders that are just way too engaged with
Right.
what's happening.
Like in Spider-Man 1, when he's like, "You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us," right? Which is like this nice. I'm not complaining about it. It's a very nice post 9/11 moment of New York solidarity. But it does kind of stick out a little bit as that, right? It does stick out a little bit.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that show gets, I mean, not show, that movie gets away with it a little bit more because it is in this heightened reality. But like this is meant to be grounded.
yeah.
So when you suddenly cut to the people on there, like watching with their iPhones out, as is typical, being like, go, go, Cap, go. It's like, did everybody just get like I don't know, maybe everybody's really plugged into Twitter
I
in
think the
this
thing, yeah,
world.
the thing is just like, I thought the Captain America first of all, his outfit looks absolutely nothing like Steve Rogers' outfit from any of the Captain Americas, right? Like it's like, isn't it? There's a lot more white in it, as far as I can recall. It like looks a lot different, and he's got the red visor and everything. So I don't know
Mhm.
how. I don't. So first of all, like it's the U.S. government's place to determine who Captain America is. Was my understanding, right? There's like a program or whatever, and they name who Captain America is. But okay, putting that aside, it's like, okay, let's say I'm ignoring that. Then theoretically, you're expecting me to understand that like a bystander just looking at Sam would then conclude, oh, that's Captain America. When it's like, it's just some guy in some outfit that looks pretty different than like Captain America's. It's just like, I just don't. I understand what the show is trying to do. It's trying to make it so that it's about Sam's journey to kind of taking on the mantle of Captain America. I get it. I get what it's trying to do, but the execution is just so stilted and unbelievable, and with so little attention to detail that I cannot be emotionally caught up in it. Some people
I
have,
also
yeah,
think it cuts against the themes of the show because you've got it's like Sam Wilson's whole thing is like he's not blonde, he's not white, but he's gonna take up this role and keep fighting for a country that he believes in. And so like the whole idea is like he doesn't look like Captain America and isn't immediately
he
recognizable.
doesn't look like what people think Captain America, quote unquote, should
Right.
look like, right? And theoretically, there is like something to overcome in people's pre-existing biases and stuff like that, and like that might have been interesting dramatic material for the show to mine, right?
Right. And so for the crowds to like immediately recognize him as that cuts against that. And I also think like a lot of these kind of like unrealistic dialogue as you're suggesting, I think if you have Chris Evans up there saying like I'm Captain America, like I don't think you would question it quite nearly as much, which could have been an interesting thing to like kind of mine. I just think the performances between actors and styles are very different. And
I don't exactly know what you're indicating there, Dan. Like, just you think, yeah, I don't know what you're saying there.
I think Chris Evans's performance is more heightened. Like it's not, he's not going for like guy from like, I mean, I guess in the first movie he is, but I think he kind of takes on a much larger role, and I think Sam is still finding that place. And like
You're saying Sam as a character is more like low key, right?
right. Yes.
Than Steve Rogers is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think just the I'm not even talking. I'm not
Steve
even
Rogers
talking
is
about
Captain America.
I'm not even
Sorry.
talking about the performance. Like the performance is fine in my opinion. It's just more
Yeah.
like the mechanics of how somebody becomes like literally in the first episode. There's like a press conference where like it's like, hey, this is the new Captain. There's like an advertising budget. You don't just get to say I'm Captain America and then everyone understands that that's the case. Like, and I thought that like like him trying to take that mantle, convincing the government and the American people that he should have it, which he should, was going to be part of the journey of the show. But instead, the show just kind of hits fast forward button on it and gets you right there, basically at the beginning of this episode. So
yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. For me, it's like, yeah, that cuts against the theme, which is that like Sam Wilson is more low key, and the other Captain America literally started his career as a performance. He was not a hero. Like he was a guy dancing on a stage.
Yeah.
So.
I just want to be careful. I just want to be careful that you're not saying things like, "Doesn't it feel like Steve Rogers should be Captain America and Sam shouldn't?"
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't think so. So I just wanted to make sure like you had a chance to clarify that. So
okay. Well, thank you for watching my back.
So anyway, I was confused by the whole Captain America stuff and how that played out, and it felt like a really missed opportunity, is what I'll say about it.
So how do you feel about the scene where he comes down and addresses the GRC members on television? I mean, to me, this is like, if this scene works for you, then like I think you're going to enjoy this episode more. But if it doesn't, this could potentially completely undermine the whole thing.
Yeah, I think this is basically catastrophic. Like this is like. It's truly terrible, the speech, for a variety of reasons. Okay, first of all, the politics of the show are a disaster. I think I'll put up this tweet by Garrett Gilchrist, who tweeted this in the chat, and you can't see this, Dan, but it's a conversation between Bucky and Carly. And Bucky saying, "So wait, are the Flag Smashers anti-fascist? Because I was anti-fascist, and I think it's in bad taste if our villains are a parody of anti-fascists." And then Carly says, "We're anti-nationalists. It's a contrast to the militaristic nationalism of Captain America." And then Bucky says, "Nationalism and fascism are interrelated. It's almost the same thing." And Carly says, "Your mom's the same thing." But it's a good question. It's a good question of like, what even are the show's politics? Like, what is even the show trying to say? To the extent it has any coherent version of politics, it's that, hey, Carly Morgenthau's objectives aren't bad, but her methods are, right? That's kind of what Sam says a few episodes ago. He's like, I'm not even opposed to your objective. I just don't want you murdering people, right? But the problem with that is we see the main like that's the fundamental problem with the show is we see the main actors of the show murdering people, killing people left and right. And then, so it's really, it's about techniques. It's not about ideology then. And it's like, and the techniques we see are questionable on both sides. So I think from a politics standpoint, the show makes absolutely no sense. And secondly, John Hoyer responded to a tweet I wrote yesterday, and I think he really nailed it, Dan. He wrote, he was more positive on the show than me or Slate magazine, but it was rather insulting to see them act like a West Wing style speech would change the hearts and minds of bad senators. We just lived through the Obama years. We know that doesn't work, end quote. And I'm just like, yeah, it's so true. I mean, we live in a world of very cynical politics, and the vision of this show is like idealism and truth and the old version of the American way that people remember that now makes room for diverse characters and people can be the way forward. But we all know things don't work like that, and the fact that this show brushes up so closely against quote-unquote realism is a real problem when it comes to landing this final speech. So those are my thoughts. What do you think of the speech, Dan?
Well, it's like Mr. Falcon goes to Washington. You know, I didn't. I think like the sentiments expressed are ones I think that we can all somewhat agree with. You know, like the power to, you know, he says the only power I have is that I believe that we can do better. You know, but I don't know what that means in the context of this. Like, I understand that he, you know, if he sees like this restless, underrepresented group of people that, you know, whose voice he wants to promote, saying like, look, if you don't help out these people, you know, you're going to get someone who does even worse than Carly the next time around. Like, you can't ignore and, you know, push all these people aside, but we've not really seen that suffering. And I think that gets to like Carly's, you know, motivations are very vague. There's this woman that died, Danya Madani, who we never met. We have no idea what that movement was like.
We saw her dying, so we didn't.
Sure.
You know, yeah, but you're right. I don't know if she speaks a single line of dialogue in the show.
We said hello and goodbye within a second. And, you know, like, it makes like whatever Sam is sticking up for fairly hollow. You know, I don't know what it means to have a world without borders and you know, like what that would mean in the context of this show or this new reality in the world. I mean, it seems like things are going okay outside of these skirmishes that are popping up here. You know, and so I like the acknowledgement of like how race plays a role in, you know, him as Captain America. But you're right. We do live in this like, you know, post West Wing, I guess, world. I can't even watch the West Wing anymore because it seems so unrealistic.
There's a lot of great comments in the chat I want to acknowledge right now. First of all,
sure, yeah.
Nick Riddick TV says, imagine hearing that from a man with wings and goggles on, LOL. And I agree. It was kind of silly. It felt a little goofy that he was wearing the wings and the goggles and giving this speech on national television. It's just like, it did feel kind of silly to me. Santiago 3J1 says, the super cop killed a dude, but then he seemed like he was sorry, so he gets to be super cop again, just in a different suit, which I guess is true to life. But man, it did not feel right on this show. And this goes towards the whole, like, how they handled Walker at all. I agree. It just really, really muddled.
Well, you could use that description for Falcon too. I mean, like, this show is trying to dismantle the infallibility of the military. But then, you know, we're supposed to just allow, you know, Sam to murder so long as he's doing it like on behalf of the military in the wages of war. Like, it's being critical of the very thing and then not addressing it at all. And it's weirdly like how much his speech in that scene seems like a both sides, you know, thing. And from the first appearance of Black Captain America to have him kind of both sidesing, you know, this argument on the behalf of terrorists. I mean, like, people who actually murdered someone,
yes,
versus politicians who are trying to handle what they admit is a complicated matter, is very strange.
Agreed. And I mean, excusing murder is something that this show does quite a lot of, by the way.
Yeah.
Between what the Flag Smashers do and what Zemo does, right? Like, people be murdering people left and right, but they're cool with it on the show. All in the Game is in the chat, and I believe All in the Game is one of these folks who actually really likes the show and shows up and contradicts a lot of the things we say, and that's totally cool. I respect that you're coming in.
Sure.
But All in the Game, he or she said, you're simply not going to get the politics you want from a Disney PG-13 property. To which I would say, I don't know then. Like, first of all, I don't. The implication here is that a Disney PG-13 property can't be smart, which I think I resent that implication. And then the second thing is, maybe don't try to have like a kind of dystopian, potentially fascist organization called the GRC try to organize things and have a terrorist organization murder people on their way to like getting people to achieve a form of society that they desire. You don't need to introduce those ideas into the show. It could just be, hey, Falcon and Winter Soldier team up to fight Thanos' son or something like. It doesn't need to be as complicated as they made it. They're the ones that brought in these ideas. I'm not the one that's like saying, why didn't they go into they brought up the ideas, not me, right? So
right. And I don't want any politics from this necessarily. I just want it to be coherent.
Yes. Have a point of view. State it clearly and effectively. That's all I want. I'm not saying why did not this advocate for progressive views? Like, I don't even care about that. I just want it to actually make sense. I want it to be coherent to some degree. So,
and I'm gonna throw this out there. In a comic book in the 80s where Captain America turns into a werewolf off and on, they still dealt with this stuff, and it made more sense, and it was probably aimed at the same exact age audience. So like, you can do it well. In fact, it was done well 40 years ago. So I think that's a bit of a lame excuse to suggest that Disney, because Disney can do it well. We've seen it in other properties where it's been handled well. Like I dare say Black Panther handled this stuff fairly well. So I just think, that's a way of yada-yadaing, past or making excuses for the show. But I mean, I respect your opinions.
Here's 5 minutes of why you're completely wrong to have said that. Also, All in the Game clarifies, I don't love the show. Me correcting a couple factual mistakes you made last week doesn't mean I love the show. It has problems starting the showrunner, in my opinion. Okay, cool. Sorry to mischaracterize All in the Game. And yes, I actually am grateful. I'm always actually grateful for people correcting factual mistakes, because
for sure,
if they don't correct factual mistakes, there's only one of two possibilities. Either no one is actually watching what you're doing, or number two, they are watching it and they think you're not good enough to be correct, right? So if people are correcting my factual mistakes, I actually welcome that, and I don't want to say false things or mischaracterize. So anyway. Okay, the English loyalist says U.S. Agent was the highlight of the show. I think you meant to say low light, and also moment that made me hate the show even more. No, I'm just joking. I'm glad you like that moment. I mean, so let's talk about the ending and like where things stand as of the end of the show, right? I mean, I freaking hate stuff in movies and TV shows that's like, you are the Scarlet Witch. They call me the Martian Manhunter. Just there's going to be carnage. I hate when it's just they say it straight into the camera. Like, it comes out of nowhere. It's not organic. It's not earned in any way. It's just, here's the thing from the comic. Enjoy. What did you make of this moment at the end with Contessa and John Walker? So John Walker is no longer going to be Captain America. He's going to be rebranded as U.S. Agent. She says, quote, "We're going to need a U.S. Agent." Now, you know about John Walker. You know about the character of U.S. Agent. Were you satisfied by this sort of origin story for U.S. Agent?
Okay, I'm gonna come at this two ways, David. So hear me out here. Yes. I think this scene is an absolute disaster of a scene, but I do want to defend her calling him U.S. agent in the
Okay.
show.
Yes, tell me.
So I'm going to take issue with your main complaint.
Okay, please.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I think this John Walker guy is all about titles, right? Like he got the Captain America title and that meant a lot to him, even if it ultimately was his undoing. I suspect that he couldn't bear the pressure of that title. So like if this is a smart person, she sees that that's a motivator for him. So she's like relabeling him, and you can see his resultant joy. He's like, "Yeah, U.S. agent. I like the sound of that," or whatever. So like, I think yes, it was a wink to the audience, like, "Hey, you know, U.S. agent," even though you probably don't. But it's a thing in the comics. I do think in the narrative, there's justification for doing something like that, more than say, like you are the Scarlet Witch or whatever one you want to have a bone to pick with this week. But does that sound satisfying to you at all, David?
No, not at all. I will say that U.S. Agent feels more organic to me than Martian Manhunter.
Well, almost anything would.
Right, but it feels like, oh, that's something that someone could actually say in a normal sentence. You know what I mean? We're going to need a U.S. agent. Wait a second, that's a catchy title. I could see that actually happening. But no, I find your argument unpersuasive.
Okay, well, I tried. But I do think the rest of the scene is an absolute disaster because we start the scene with like Val making jokes about whether or not she planned the deaths of the Flag Smashers, even though it was just strongly implied that it was Baron Zemo. So we know that she didn't. But it makes me like question, like, okay, well, how are we supposed to feel about this person? Like, is she a good guy? Is she a bad guy? If you want to just break it down into black and whites, but like, she doesn't even seem clear about how she wants to project herself to other people. And it just kind of seems like people being like, hey, we got Julia Louis-Dreyfus and she's going to do her Dreyfus thing and be funny and fun. And I was like, well, I felt like we got something very different from her in the previous episode. I just have no idea how to feel about this character. And then the same thing goes with U.S. Agent, so to speak. I mean, we get the costume reveal. It's the same thing, but black. But like this guy we were just saw redeem himself is now like eager to do some clandestine stuff. And I don't know how am I supposed to be like fearful of him getting this title?
Right.
Am I supposed to be excited that he gets to go back out in the field and redeem himself and he's a character worthy of respect? If I don't know who he is from the comics, I really have no idea how to feel about this. And I am someone that knows him from the comics, and I still don't know how to feel about it.
I think that his whole heel turn or whatever you call it, like how if you were to graph John Walker's moral clarity, I guess, moral character in the last like 2 to 3 episodes, it would be like a freaking Rocky Mountain range. It'd be like it'd go like blip and then nope, and he murdered a dude and then nope, but then he took the serum and then and then he did and it's like and then by the end I'm like I have no idea where we are with this guy. So
it's whatever the writers want it to be for the moment they need.
Yeah. We got a lot of closing of the loop with Bucky. He goes. Where are we going to see Mr. Nakajima again? He goes sees Mr. Nakajima. I'm pretty sure they filmed this scene on the same day that they filmed the scene where he saw him in the first episode because he's burning the incense or whatever with his son, like literally the exact same kind of setup right when he enters. And
I've just been here this whole time.
Was this at all satisfying to you? I think of like the Bourne Supremacy, which has like one of the great versions of this scene, in my opinion. You watch Bourne Supremacy?
Yes, it's just been a long time.
At the end of Bourne Supremacy, like Jason Bourne spends the whole movie evading, like he spends the whole movie trying to figure out one of his first assassinations, like what happened at one of his first assassinations. And then he figures it out and he realizes that he murdered this. So he was supposed to murder this guy, right? But the wife accidentally shows up, like it was unplanned. So then he has to murder both of them and make it seem like a murder-suicide, right? and they had a daughter. They had a daughter, right? So he spends the whole movie like tracking down this daughter, and in the final scene of Born Supremacy, spoilers, he's like, I want you to know that like I murdered your parents. Your mom didn't kill your dad and then kill herself, or vice versa. I murdered them, and he's like, it changes things, that knowledge. Uh, and he says like, I'm very sorry, whatever. But like, he can't. What you're left with is like, this person can't redeem himself. He can't make this person's life, who he's traumatized, better. Their lives better, but like he can at least provide them some like informational closure. It's like a really great moment in this movie, in my opinion. And that's kind of what this moment with Bucky is supposed to be at the end. But I felt absolutely nothing, and I'm curious if you felt anything.
I felt nothing, and I think it's because the scene is really mishandled. Because you've got Bucky going in to confront Mr. Nakajima, but then the camera lingers on Mr. Nakajima's emotional reaction to it, which is like it's worth seeing. But the real struggle in the scene should be Bucky having like forcing himself to really do this, right? Because he's been delaying it as much as he can, like actually making real amends. As was said in a previous episode, it's time to stop avenging and start amending, and instead we get this kind of melodramatic like facial contortions from Mr. Nakajima, which that's no fault of the actors, but I think the scene should be about Bucky's difficulty with doing this, if that's the character arc that we're writing. And I felt nothing as good, as of a performer as he is. I just felt nothing in that moment of the character struggles. And then it just, again, I keep using the yada yada, maybe because I'm on a Julia Louis-Dreyfus binge here, but we just move on to a scene where like, oh, now Bucky, we don't even get to see him make amends or the struggle of him making amends in other ways. He's just done with his book and he hands it off to his therapist, and we're done. Let's just wipe our hands of that.
It's the whole like, through the adventures they've had, he has become a better person, right? This is the trope, is like, hey, this guy had some personality issues. He goes on all these adventures, and at the end, he's like resolved his personality issues, right? Like that's kind of very common in like action films and whatever.
And don't worry, the girl that he ditched on the date, she's still jonesing for some Bucky.
I thought it was a little bit ambiguous what was going on there.
Okay, all
right.
I
thought it was less like, hey, I still want you, and more like, I recognize you,
Okay.
But
that I think recognizing him is like even too far, after like just him walking out in the middle of the restaurant and leaving her with the check. Like, not a good move.
Well, weren't they in the restaurant that she runs? So it was.
Oh, I guess that's fair.
Yeah, so there's no check there. Come on, Dan. Let's not nitpick things that don't exist. We would never do that on this YouTube channel.
Never.
All right, so what else happens? Sam goes to Elijah's house, and then they decide to go to the Captain America museum. And there is like a monument there, and this is actually like a genuinely nice moment, I thought. I'm sorry, Isaiah, you wrote Elijah in the doc, but it's Isaiah Bradley, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, I was mistyping.
Okay, I was like, you got your biblical names mixed up, Dan.
Well, no, his grandson is Elijah.
That's right.
Sorry, that's the character I'm more familiar with reading. So yeah.
So he goes, and then this is what I'm talking about. This scene where he goes to the and it's like actually like touching, like very emotional. That like, hey, there's like a statue and everything like that, and that's like very nice. It's like, hey, but then he says, I don't know exactly what the line he says is, but it's something like, now they'll never forget you. And I'm just like, oh, like why? This is exactly my problem with the show, is you don't need that line. Like, we already understand what is happening in this scene. Like, he gives him this big emotional hug, and it's very emotional, and I love it. And it's like, just have that. Like, you don't need the line where he's like, now they're never going to forget. It's like, it's characters just saying the subtext,
Well, not only that, but that particular like version of the line, I felt like reoriented it back into how other people
Right.
feel
It's
instead of
like
how
it's about
Or
it
Isaiah feels.
exactly. It's not even necessarily about that was. I agree. I had that reaction too. I'm like, who gives a shit whether people remember? Like, it's more about him having this whole thing of like that he has been acknowledged and like now he has like a thing that represents who he really was and what he actually contributed.
Right.
Um,
And the
but
cinematography in that scene is beautiful too, as the camera like moves over the statue and the shadows fill in under the eyes, and it was genuinely emotional. If and the performances, but then you have lines like that where you're just like, no,
it
stop.
just snaps you out of the reality of the scene. It's a
Yeah,
bummer. Okay, and then we go back to the boat, baby.
yeah, barbecuing at the boat.
Woo!
Yeah,
Everyone's happy and the end.
we got some sunset. We got some soft focus. I mean, that's how you end something.
Maybe Bucky and Sam's sister are gonna get together after all.
Knocking boots.
Okay. And then we find out that the actual title of the show is Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Dun, dun, dun. Final post-credit scene, Sharon Carter gets a pardon, gets her job back, and decides to place a phone call from the front of the building. First of all, unclear to me why this scene is happening in the same place where they were chastising John Walker. I don't know what that's all about. Like, is this the pardoning / censure room that's happening?
You don't want to go in that
And
room. There's only two outcomes.
and it's with the same dude that did the John Walker. It's like, okay, whatever. And then Sharon Walker like walks out to the front of the building and is like, "Hey, good news, fellow enemies of the state. We're gonna have access to all this shit." Pro tip: if you're going to plan acts of sedition, in general, do not do them right outside of the building that your the act is going to be inflicted upon. Although I guess some people in the U.S. government have tried it and it's worked okay for them. Okay. Any thoughts on the final sequence? The power broker is now inside the U.S. government, Dan. Huge, huge change of status quo. I'm being sarcastic, but
I genuinely don't care. Although I do want to say, like, the way that this was shot, it makes it look like she was literally standing on the steps and then she got her cue, like, okay, now you can start talking. Because she just like hangs there for a second. Oh yeah, I'm on the phone. Let's walk down. It's just so cheap looking. And I just don't understand this character. Like, her whole motivation was that she felt wronged by the U.S. government. So okay, so we get a big scene where the U.S. government apologizes, literally gives her her job back, and now she's like, "Guess I'm gonna milk this." Like, so okay, great. So now I really don't like this Sharon Carter character. Like, there's nothing redeeming about that. I just flat out don't like her. And not even in an interesting way. I'm just
right.
like, ew, gross. You're a bad person. You
You
make me
want
feel.
you're
Yeah,
ideally you want your villains to be interesting, right? You want your villains to be people you can either relate to or understand why they're doing what they're doing, right?
yeah, and like now I get to retroactively go back and watch a great movie, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and like, gross, that character's in it. She seemed
That
okay.
character
Now I
sucks.
just know she
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of all this time that we've spent watching and discussing this show, how do you make sense of all this time, Dan?
Oh, I mean,
It's I here's what I'm going to say. We have virtually every one of these YouTube episodes has been longer than the actual episode we've been discussing. And I do think it's fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about. People might not think we're having fun, but I actually have enjoyed talking about it with you. The commentary in the chat has been really fun. Like, people have pointed out things I haven't thought of or stuff like that. I'm really glad we got to do this. It was a great experiment. And my YouTube channel now has over 20,000 subscribers, Dan. So, mission accomplished. But as you're looking back on the show, what do you think?
I think it's a I don't know if I want to call it a failure, but I think it is. You're seeing a company do something new, and and for what that's worth, I think this is like them really struggling to do it, and Ultimately, I think I said the last time, like, if this was a 2 hour thing, I think it would move fast enough that we could like, and things would have to be simplified.
Yeah,
And
there would have
yeah,
been a bunch of characters that were never introduced if this was like a 2 hour movie, right?
it would be tighter overall. And I think compared to WandaVision, which actually felt like real, true serialized, like a television event, even if I didn't love the ending of that,
Yeah.
I respected the vision for it and the
This
pacing.
Falcon Winter Soldier makes you retroactively appreciate WandaVision much more, I would say.
Well, the emotional clarity of the end of that show was very clear. I had no questions about why characters were doing things.
Yeah.
I maybe wanted a little bit less of people throwing red and blue beams at each other.
Yeah.
But looking back, I can't really complain. I think this is just kind of like a mess, and I think that was known by the company. I mean, there's been a pretty widely reported internal stuff about this show being a bit of a struggle for them, that they kind of tried to reshuffle. And we don't know what that's related to, if there's like a whole other plot line that got removed or whatever. But I don't think that that's enough to make up for what we ultimately got, which just seems like a show that didn't really know what it wanted to say and just kept adding on top of it in lieu of actually getting to the core. And it gets to that whole like too many villains in a movie thing. I don't think that's a really real complaint. It's just when that is used in lieu of actually getting to a clear story. And I can't quite get there. And I also find it interesting, like the status quo doesn't really change if you think about it. Like at the end of Endgame, you got Sam getting this shield. And if you didn't see this show,
Yeah.
and you go into the
So
next Captain America movie.
singular Rookhart in the chat says, the way I see it, if you saw Endgame, you saw Steve hand the shield to Sam, and you can jump to the next film featuring Sam as Cap and not be required to see the road to it. And that's the thing. This show is pretty much completely disposable when it comes to the plot. Like, if you never saw the show, in the next movie, Sam shows up, he's Captain America. It's like, oh yeah, that's what happens between the movies. He's Captain America. Bucky's journey, I guess, is kind of like an interesting denouement to his relationship with Steve. And then theoretically, we'll know who Contessa is and who John Walker are. And that's like basically what the show has contributed to the MCU.
And I think that's what the MCU is going to be wrestling with, is like, as they continue to produce content, how much of this are you going to need to be able to watch? And that was my ultimate fear of this television venture, is that it's going to water it down. And the minute you start watering something down, it potentially threatens to break people's interest. I mean, like for me, like I write all these articles about Star Wars for the Hollywood Reporter. And at one point I considered myself like one of the most knowledgeable Star Wars fans, although I feel like everybody feels that way about themselves. But like, I can't keep up with all the TV shows. And then suddenly you're watching, like the Solo movie, and like Darth Maul is back from the dead. And there's all these things that are tying into like a cartoon show that I was meant to watch. I've heard it's quite good. So, I mean, I maybe I'll check it out at some point, but like, at what point do you threaten to break the whole thing by requiring too much of your audience? And, I think this, maybe it's playing it a bit safer, but it also makes this feel like a complete wet fart. See, I did it again.
Yeah, you're doing it again.
So,
okay. So there's a few comments in the chat I want to acknowledge. First of all, Mattian99 says, would genuinely love for you guys to do Loki. Actual discussion of these shows is worth a lot because of how rare it is. This is kind of what makes me a little bit... When I survey the field, Dan Gvozden, I'm not like, oh yes, I'm doing an important... something important, in the field of cultural criticism, because like I'm telling it like it is. I actually feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like maybe like the world of Marvel shows and other things, like people don't want someone like me talking about why it's not great. I mean, the thing is, when it is great, we try to acknowledge it.
for sure, we liked episode 5.
Yeah. And also most of WandaVision. That's why I wanted to do this. I was like, oh, WandaVision was like the ending kind of sucked, but like 80% of that show was like great. And so like maybe this will be that again, right? And but it wasn't, and that's disappointing. But I just I appreciate the encouragement, Matthian, and maybe we will do Loki. But
And Loki looks great.
Loki looks great, but when I look around and everyone's like, on Twitter nonstop, how amazing this show is. Just like everyone is talking about how amazing the show is, and I'm the only one who thinks like it might not be great. Me and this person from Slate, and it's like, honestly, it feels like I don't even know. It's not that I don't feel like my opinion is useful, or it's not that I don't feel like my opinion has any value. It's more like, do people even want to hear a critical opinion of these shows? I don't know. I don't know what place something like this has in our current media landscape. So anyway, just a thought I had.
My response to that would be that, I mean, clearly it does, because someone is saying, this one person.
At least one person, Matt T at 99.
But I do think like these movies and shows don't need anyone's praise.
That's kind of my opinion. There's billions of dollars and millions of people who are like backing these shows, who are supporting, loving these shows, and it's like, I think it's fine to have like an opposing point of view as well sometimes, which not even, I mean, Endgame's like one of my favorite movies. It's not like I hate all MCU movies. Anyway, so Greyjoy84 makes an interesting suggestion, which is he or she says, you should do the full season of Invincible next week, which you and I have talked about how, man, we should have covered Invincible on Prime Video instead of this show. We should have done that, because Invincible, I think, is like a much more interesting show than this, and also
I'm a big fan of Invincible,
and also like more consistent in its execution. So if you are watching this and you've made it this far and you want us to do this and or Loki, hit us up in the comments below. Let us know that you want us to cover more stuff, because otherwise I'm gonna assume you don't. And let's see what else. Some people are saying nice thoughts in the chat, so that's very nice. Okay, well, this has been
when you go fishing, Dave, you're gonna catch fish.
Okay, All in the Game says, not everyone thinks it's great, David. You make yourself sound like a little special, thinking that you're the only one that has issues with the show. Okay, sorry, I'm not trying to make myself sound special. I guess when I'm talking about my own individual infosphere, right? Like on Twitter, when I look at Twitter, it's like, all the critics that I respect, it's every week talking about how the show is awesome, basically. Agreed, not everyone. I don't think I'm a special snowflake or anything, but that's been my perception. I want to close by saying thanks to Dan Gvozden for joining me on this adventure. You can check out more of his work at amazingspidertalk.com. I think there is this perception a lot of the time that it's like that these shows that we do, like these recap shows, they just kind of happen. Oh, yes, Dave and Dan, they're hanging out and they're just turning on the recording device and it happens. And it's like, no, this actually takes work and intentionality and like time out of your day to like write down the show notes and think about it. This episode accepting that, of course. Not everyone has the time or inclination to like try something like this with me. And Dan's one of those people that's game for it. So this stuff doesn't just happen automatically. It's not like I'm just like, hey, let's do it, and then it happens. Like, I appreciate Dan taking a chance, doing this show with me, and sticking with it even as my faith in the show declined dramatically in the last 5 weeks. So thank you, Dan. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I had a great time, and I know what I'm in for. I've been listening to your stuff for a decade, I guess, or more. So your reactions are no surprise to me, and I think one of the highlights of the show for me was me expressing your thoughts before you even had to say them. So that's what I come for is the pushback, the good conversation, the honest takes. I mean, if we weren't giving you our honest thoughts, I think what value would we really have? And going through that with you has been really valuable to me because yeah, me too. Like my entire ecosystem, which is much more comics oriented, is still full of effusive praise for these products. And for me, it's part of the process of kind of going through and working through my problems with this material or even love of it, and kind of figuring out where that comes from, because I also think it's worthwhile to like push these things to be better. If they're going to be the premier content that people are enjoying week to week, I know that I said like not every show should be everything to everyone, or needs to address all the ills in society. But if you are in the top spot, you do owe it a little bit to be coherent and make sure the message you are saying makes sense, is responsible, and so on. So I do think conversations like ours can help play an important role.
All right, folks. I'm just going to say the people in the comments right now are being so nice. Thank you all for sticking around, for your encouragement. It really does mean a lot. And I hope if you're watching this after the broadcast, that you enjoyed the show. Feel free to hit like or subscribe. Hit the bell icon. You'll get a notification whenever we go live and do one of these things. I don't know when we're going to do these things in the future. Maybe we'll do one for, again, Invincible next week. If you want us to do that, hit us up in the comments. If you want us to do Loki, hit us up in the comments. But appreciate you watching. Thanks, and we will see you soon.